and gentlemen, here it is, the most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
Hi, this is Jake Tokup with Rocky Mountain Construction, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge Podcast.
Hi, this is Adam Sandy with Zamperla, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge Podcast.
How's it going? This is Kyle Smith, the manager of creative show operations here at SeaWorld Orlando, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge Podcast.
Hi, I'm Grace Peacock, Director of Communications at Canada's Wonderland, and you are listening to the Coaster Challenge Podcast.
Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Yes, I accept the Coaster Challenge. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Coaster Challenge Podcast is here. It's time to face your fears. Get that theme park therapy and lend us both your Coaster Challenge Podcast is here. Your fear can disappear. We know that theme park therapy can dry up all your tears. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Yes, I accept the Coaster Challenge. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? We accept because you know we're not average.
You're listening to the Coaster Challenge Podcast. A journey where people become fearful to fearless, all from riding roller coasters. So please secure your hats and glasses and keep your hands and arms inside the podcast. It's time to accept the Coaster Challenge with your host, Andrew Locke.
Hey everyone, this is Andrew, one of the executive producers of the Coaster Challenge Podcast. Today we've got not one, but two very special guests. Way back in 1973, two interesting events happened. For one, I was born in November of that year. Much more interesting than that, though, about a month prior, the theme park haunt was born at Knott's Berry Farm. Indeed, Knott's Berry Farm is the longest-running theme park haunt in the world. Today, we're going to talk about two of the newest creations that Knott's Berry Farm put out to the world. Coaster Challenge Podcast is proud to welcome back from Knott's Berry Farm show writer Jeff Tucker. And joining Jeff today, and new to the podcast, is scenic designer Daniel Miller. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff. I should say welcome back, Jeff, and welcome, Daniel.
Hello. Good to be back.
Awesome to have you guys. We're excited to talk all about haunts today. It's haunt season here, and we love haunt season, so this is going to be fun. So, of course, Jeff, you've been on the podcast before. We know who you are. I'm
sorry.
The first thing, appreciate the apology. But Daniel, you're new to the show here. So just to start off here, Daniel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience working in the theme park, the haunt industry?
I've been working at Knott's Berry Farm for 25 years. Actually, a little bit more. I started as a monster around 3 to 4 years before that. Then I got a graduate degree at NYU for set design. And when I loved my experience working as a monster at Knott's Berry Farm, so I actually applied back, and as Kismet would have it, they had an opening for design, and it was not just design, it was actually creation of the mazes. So I just said, yes, this is perfect. So I jumped on the opportunity, and I've been here since 25 years. I've designed around 25 of the mazes. I say that's probably plus or minus a lot. So I've done a lot. So it's more than a job for me. It's a passion. So, I probably even do it for free. Don't tell my bosses that. So, but that basically, I just love to scare the bejeebers out of people. So
that's awesome. That's really awesome. So you said 25 years there at Knott's Berry Farm, and maybe a few years before that as a scare actor, you said?
Yeah, I was actually at Knott's Berry Farm, a scare actor. And before that, in college, I was a scare monster too at a little haunted house at UC Irvine. So,
interesting. Okay.
That's where I got the bug. Is that I came?
Oh, wow.
And it was like the Star Trek Association of Irvine was holding a haunted house, and I love Star Trek, so I joined their club. And part of being in their club is you're a scare monster. And I previously loved Knott's Berry Farm as a guest, and I just, and my mom loved horror films. Just absolutely adored horror films.
Nice.
It took me at a very young age to horror films. So getting scared and having frights was always built into my life. And, but concentrated down the last 25 years working for entertainment design and Knott's Berry Farm and designing just a lot of mazes.
Nice. That's awesome. Now, you mentioned the Star Trek Association. That's certainly, Star Trek is something that you, Jeff, and I all share, all big Star Trek fans. sci-fi fans, of course, in general. You said the Star Trek Association wanted to sponsor a haunted house.
They actually put on the haunted house, and they put on an alien type of haunted house, and it was really fun.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
Yeah. What was
no, I'm just saying that what I'm getting at is it's interesting because Star Trek is not normally a horror related. I mean, some of the movies, the Borg, can get a little edgy, but yeah, not really a haunt area. Yeah.
It was actually like Dark Entities right now. It was alien related.
Someone at the door.
Hold
that thought. There's someone at my door.
Oh, no worries. We'll edit this out.
Question for you about the end of the talk thing that you sent over the email. Do you want all the character sheets?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, just send whatever you got. Thank you.
No problem. Hey, you're at work. I get it. So Daniel, why don't we just kind of continue, start over with that answer. I'll prompt you, and again we'll clean this up and edit and post. So normally Star Trek isn't associated with horror. So what's the story there?
So the group was very eclectic. It was science fiction of all kinds, and they also loved the movie Alien. So we have a maze very similar right now called Dark Entities, about going through abandoned alien ship. And that's basically what the theme was of this maze that was in this mall that we put on. So it was very sci-fi related maze. So
nice. That's awesome. That sounds fun. Very cool. So given I'm doing math here, and it's already kind of later in the day when we're recording this for me, so my math might be a little bit off. But Jeff, did you start at the farm around 94? Is that right?
94, yeah.
Okay, good memory, because I remember you told me that in the interview a year ago. So you guys started there right around the same time, at least as a scare actor for you, Daniel.
Yeah,
and then
okay, as a scare actor. In '98, I came back as a designer.
Right. Okay. So you guys have worked together quite a bit, and yeah, nice, awesome. So that's why it's okay if you could be in the same room together. You guys play well together. Okay. Got it. Okay, very good. Well, thanks, Daniel, for explaining that. That's tremendous experience. Just like Jeff has. The hanging, being around for years, and all the other things Jeff's done, and to be exciting to talk to both of you about the things that you guys have done more recently, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But before we do that, just kind of as we typically do in our podcast, just kind of talk about a couple general things. We're not going to talk about coasters or thrill rides today, or any kind of attractions per se. At the normal Knott's Berry Farm, we're really going to talk about Knott's Scary Farm only, and perhaps go beyond the farm to other haunts that you guys have been to. So, the first question, I certainly would like both of you to answer this, is what would you say is the one haunt in your life? The maze, or it could be a scare zone, it could be some special thing that you've been to that has really freaked you out the most, scared you the most.
You want me to go first? Did I talk about this on another show? I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't think we did, Jeff. Yeah, I'll let you know if it sounds familiar.
We talked about when I was a kid going to one of those bump and go haunted houses at the carnival. And
yeah,
I hated it because I could tell it was one room, and that the car was bumping into a scene, and the light and the buzzer would sound, and a monster would lurch forward. Then it would just turn and do the same thing. And I remember thinking, I've been cheated. Like, this was 4 tickets, and I've been cheated because it's not going anywhere. Because I'm so used to the Little Rascals had an episode where they go in a haunted house, and it's the greatest thing you've ever seen, where the skeletons come down and there's a guy playing a piano. And there's also a really good one in the movie Ed Wood that's kind of reminiscent of that old school stuff, which only exists in your imagination because it was never really like that. Because the one thing you learn doing it, and Daniel can attest to this, is you can come up with anything you want, but it has to be reset within 2 seconds for the next guest coming in. And the reset's the killer every time. But the scariest one I can remember was I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, and trick-or-treating was like a rite of passage. Nowadays, like, I open my house up Halloween night if I'm home, there's maybe 20 kids. it used to be like E.T. You'd go out and there'd just be kids everywhere, every costume. And Halloween prior to 1988 maybe was one night. You went out for Halloween. This idea of oh my God, Halloween stuff is in stores now, and we're recording in August, so Halloween has been stretched beyond its breaking point, I think. But talking about going out for trick-or-treating, like the week leading up, you got your costume, you got ready. It's the reason I bring it up is I get asked. I am very big in the Back to the Future fan community. I've even written a book about Back to the Future, and in the context of Back to the Future, it's October 26th in Hill Valley, and there's no Halloween decorations. And younger people today ask, well, where are the Halloween decorations? And I always say, nobody decorated until the 29th or the 30th. Halloween was not a big deal back then, but it was a big deal the night of trick-or-treating. And my friends and I used to go out as a big group. I would always have some variation of a Star Wars costume. And we went 2 streets behind where this guy would set up this yard display, which was a big deal back then. Because again, Halloween was not big as far as displays and stuff the way it didn't rival Christmas the way it does now. But this guy had I think he had a gorilla on his porch, and a couple of pumpkins and some of those light up in blow mold things. And when we went up to get the candy, somebody jumped out of the top of a van, like a moonroof, and he had a samurai sword, and he started swinging at us. And I'll tell you, I thought I was dead. I thought, this guy's going to kill us. And we must have been 10 or 11, and we just ran screaming into the night.
Sounds like an episode of Scooby-Doo.
Does it really? The van? So wow. We took off running down the street. So yeah, no, it was terrifying. And that sort of cemented, this is a thing, it wouldn't manifest until I was in high school, but that was the moment Halloween became a big deal.
Wow, that's really something. I think what was key to that, Jeff, is that you were least expecting it. You go into a haunt, you go into Not Scary Farm, and it's pretty edgy, but you're expecting it. You're expecting, the intensity in the houses, even the scare zones and the sliders and all the fog, and and it's still wonderful, and people still get the bejesus scared out of them, which is great.
People always send me this video clip. I think it's out of Brazil. It's an elevator. People get on the elevator, the lights go out, the lights come on, and it looks like a little girl from The Grudge is in the elevator.
Oh yeah.
They freak out and they throw their papers and they run out, and they always send it to me and they go, "You guys should do something like this." And I always say, the person coming in the elevator is not aware that they're about to be scared in some sort of Halloween-esque event. When you click through the turnstile at Not Scary Farm, you're there. You're in the zone. You are expecting to be scared. So it's a different dynamic. So when people send that to me, and I get sent it a lot, I just politely go, yeah, that sounds great.
So this samurai sword person, was this part of the person's own, like they set this up, or was this some random thing that someone else did?
I certainly hope it was.
Wow, that's kind of creepy.
This is back when old ladies gave out popcorn balls. You had to carry around your UNICEF box to collect pennies. So I know that I sound 100 years old, but it was a different time. You went out trick-or-treating with a pillowcase. Nobody had a cell phone. You had a vague idea of what time it was. And when you got enough candy, you ran home.
Yep. No, it totally makes sense. I mean, I'm a little bit younger than you, but not much, Jeff. And I grew up in the '80s, and I remember how big trick or treating was, and how much candy and how many people were out, and how at people's houses, how they all went out, and it was a big deal back then. I remember those days. Nostalgia right there, big time.
And back then, a fun-size candy bar meant it was only half a candy bar. That was fun size. The stuff they put out now, fun size, it looks like a Tic Tac, is not fun. Less candy is not fun.
Yeah, no, it's just economics and trying to make more money off of people. No, for sure. And another thing, you mentioned there, Jeff, about Halloween starting earlier. Now, to some degree, I don't mind it because I'm a huge haunt and a huge Halloween fan within limits. But I'm on a road trip right now as we record this, but I'm going to be heading back to Florida the beginning of September. Getting back there Labor Day back home to Orlando, and I'm loving this road trip. And that's not something we necessarily need to get into here in this in the podcast in this interview. But I am very much looking forward to getting home for a number of reasons. But one of them is, especially in Florida, it's a little bit different than California. And I'm not even talking about Disney that starts in August, but the rest of the parks and all the independent haunts, a lot of them get going in early September. Universal, their Halloween Horror Nights, for example, that is starting actually Labor Day weekend while I'm gone. And as soon as I get back, like 2 days later on Wednesday, the 7th, I think it is, it'll be my first day going there with my frequent fear pass. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Halloween lasts for a good solid 2 months in a lot of places. And, these haunts and so forth, there at Knott's, it's well over a month now with you guys starting this year on, the 22nd. So, but the one other thing, that you mentioned, Jeff, that I can relate to and I was thinking of, I didn't want to interrupt you, is you're talking about how in TV shows or movies, things are represented in some fantastical way that's not practical, but they can be in a movie. And, you and I, we talked a lot about Trapped last year, first time on the show. And I'm fascinated with Trapped because I never got to experience it. And I love escape rooms. And I remember one of my first times I was exposed to the concept of an escape room, not actually going into one, but watching on a TV show, was in The Big Bang Theory. And I don't know if you guys are fans of that show, if you've seen, but the whole gang, they go to an escape room, and it's pretty wild and wacky, all the special effects and how involved it is. And it's like, well, I've been to some pretty cool escape rooms in the real life, but they're not quite as intricate as the one on Big Bang Theory, of course, because it's a TV show. So I totally agree that, life, has to be practical because it's real world. So I relate to what you said there. So, thank you for all that, Jeff. So Daniel, how about you? What's the scariest thing for you? Yeah.
Actually, to piggyback on that,
Sure.
As a kid, I used to go to all these little small haunted houses, like high school haunted houses, and I was terrified of them. That really impressed on me how scary they can be. But again, I was a big fan of horror movies, so I was used to it. But I still feel that the ones that we do are still my favorite. I still get scared occasionally in the ones that we're doing. And the one that really kind of triggers me is Trick or Treat. We used to have a maze here called Trick or Treat, which was exactly nostalgia that Jeff was leaning in on, which was it's all about that night of going out to trick or treating and going to a creepy house where there's a witch there. And the aesthetic of it was all like 1970s to 60s plastic masks. And it was a wonderful haunt, but we ran it for like around 3 or 4 years, 5 years. Mm-hmm. But the last year we ran it, we did something special where we took off all the lights, or most of the lights, and we gave it a flashlight treatment. And it was one of the first times we did that. And that scared the bejeebus out of me. Seriously, just having the flashlight, having the same props that we've been having up for 4 or 5 years, having that being flashed with a flashlight, and then everything about it shifted and changed and came alive and was animated. It was just scary. And I jumped a few times. It was like, I've been through this thing 20, 40 to 40 times. And it's just like, this is totally new, and things are moving that should not be moving. And it was all the pan of the lights and all the different little special effects that were triggered by the special light that we had. To me, that was like the last time I was really terrified at a haunted house. So that
I mean that totally. Yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead, Daniel.
That really stuck with me. So.
No, absolutely. I can relate, and I can directly relate because I did experience that. So as I told Jeff last year, I'm a huge fan of Not Scary Farm. Not just saying this because I'm talking to you guys. You can ask my friends. Jeff, you and I are connected on social media to start messaging my friends. You've started to meet some of my friends, like my friend Cameron, and they're in Southern California. I tell everyone I love Halloween Horror Nights. Well, let me rephrase. I love it in Orlando. The one in Hollywood needs some better budget. But anyways, Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando is incredible. And I go there a lot because I'm local to Orlando, but not Scary Farm for a theme park haunt. Not getting into independent haunts; those are a different kind of ball game. But for theme park haunts, not Scary Farm is by far my favorite, and that's why I will trudge across the country all the way to California from Florida. Now, once a year, I will do it. I didn't go for a number of years, but I'm like, I have to go because last year when I went, we'll be talking about my experiences last year in the main part of the interview here in a few minutes. I just had such an amazing time, especially with some of these newer attractions, which we'll be talking about. And I got to go every year now. So I love Not Scary Farm. But for a number of years, life gets in the way, or life finds a way, as Jurassic Park said. But no, life gets in the way, being married and jobs and all kinds of stuff. And for a number of years, even though I lived in Southern California for 20 years, from 98 till 2018, I didn't get to Not Scary Farm a lot, unfortunately. I regret that. Nothing against Not Scary Farm, just life got in the way. So I didn't get back there from like 2001 or so until 2017, embarrassed enough to say. So I experienced that last year of Trick or Treat with the Mice Chat gang doing the Death March, as Dusty Sage calls it, and with that group. And I had heard about the flashlights. I love technology, by the way, Daniel. Jeff knows that about me. And so I think they're the Gantham flashlights is the company that makes them. And I was fascinated. And again, just for our audience sake, to give them the full credit, you're starting to allude to that with the special effects there, Danielle. Those flashlights, they'll turn on and off based on radio frequencies in the localized room to room there. And I think the colors changed and so it was a very, I don't scare easily, but that was a creepy experience. So I definitely relate to how that would be kind of your top one. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, and that's one of the things I love about Knott's. You guys for theme park haunts are the most creative, absolutely the most creative with the things that you do, whether it be, technology like that, multiple entrances into a house, the shows that you have at the beginning of some of your mazes, which we'll be talking about a little bit later, and just, other technology things that you do are just incredible. So, that totally makes sense as a scarier experience for both of you. Very unique and different. So you both have been through these kind of very unique, scary experiences that you just talked about. Would you say those had an impact on you after that in terms of having the bejesus scared out of you, as the saying goes, and then, going forward with your life, in that Halloween sort of vibe?
But definitely, every time I go to a haunted event, I mean, for us, it's more about taking notes. It's because it's our occupation. We try to give back. So if we see something that really affects us, really makes us jump, or really creeps us out, we want to reflect that in our own work. So going to because we'll what's the term, bookmark, or where we go to other places and we'll experience it. Because for us, that's what the guest experience is. Because we create the stuff, we kind of know where all the scares will be. Actually, I have a little. What I do is we have 3 designers on staff, 3 to 4 designers on staff, and that are the main haunt designers. And I always never go through one of them. I'll know what the theme is, but I won't ever go through in the build phase. And I always leave that to like the opening night, so I, as a guest, can walk through that maze for the first time and experience that. Same as like going to another theme park or another scare place. So I'll go through and kind of learn through that. So it's mostly, for me, it's mostly about trying to gather that emotion that I experienced when something new happens. And I go, that's really interesting. I'm feeling claustrophobic there, or it's suddenly plunging me into darkness. And obviously that's one of my big triggers. Is like, oh my, like trying to feel around in the dark, or being like squeezed in. So I always want to try to take those in a healthy way and reproduce them in the maze that people normally don't ever experience.
Interesting. It makes a lot of sense that, kind of taking notes, like you said. So it sounds like, as someone, both of you working, with haunts, for a long time now, for a couple of decades plus, that if something really gets to you or really shocks you, that's something that you really want to make a note of. And if it's not something you guys already have there, want to maybe look at incorporating it because it really impressed you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Like my wife hates going through with me because I'll be just sitting there looking, and I'll be kind of falling back a little bit, and she's like terrified and trying to avoid everything, and then she just looks back and just shakes her head.
That's funny. That's funny. So Jeff, for again, your kind of scariest experience was very different. It was very early on in your life. It was not at a haunt. It was not expected at all. So can you think of any ways in which that experience, you remembered it up from all these years ago, how it impacted you, affected you in any way?
Well, I do what I think would scare me, basically. When we're working on stuff, I just go, well, what would I hate to do? I mean, we worked on Trapped. It was a whole menu of things I would not do. I've like the Dr. Seuss book. I would not eat a bug. I would not drink urine. You know what I mean? I wouldn't do all that stuff. So when people do it, I'm like, well, I guess it's working because I wouldn't do it.
So Jeff, if you like to focus on what things that scare you, you and maybe you've done this in some of the like Trapped. I never got to experience Trapped, very sadly. Anything from your experiences in your younger years with Berg that you incorporate into your houses? Like maybe there's like a room with toilet paper being thrown on the floor by a child, or
is it a monster running in 6 squares? No. The only thing you can take from my childhood, I mean, because it would just be like a male version of Mommy Dearest. It wouldn't be good at all. But the lesson you learn is what would scare me as a child moving into adulthood is tyranny, and it's go back to Trapped. Trapped presented itself as this VIP experience. When you walked up year one, there was a very nice, attractive person there who welcomed you, wearing a nice, crisp outfit, and you'd already made your reservation. It was very steakhouse-like, like a really upscale steakhouse.
Yeah.
And then you walked in, and the first room was a dirty, smelly bathroom with a guy screaming expletives at you. So
wow,
there's my childhood put into a maze, a guy screaming about cleaning this and working on that. And you're like, oh my God, I'm not going to live up to standards.
Right. Yeah. And good point. Yeah. Fascinating. Interesting. All right. Well, thanks guys for kind of doing some kind of general conversation about haunts and scares and so forth. And so let's go ahead and switch gears now for the rest of the interview. We're going to talk all about Not Scary Farm specifically, and more specifically than that, we're going to talk about 2021 at Not Scary Farm. So the most recent year, last year, and two of the newest and two of the main new features at the farm there. So first of all, last year, a new live show was featured at the farm. And when I interviewed you, Jeff, it was right around this time last year, and you said something exciting was coming. Something was very much the kind of thing that you would create, and we would be excited to see. But of course, you couldn't get the details. And then, a month or two later, David, myself, a couple other members of the team, we show up there, opening weekend of Scary Farm, and we encounter Invitation to Terror, and just completely blown away by it. And we already had become familiar with you, myself, of course, interviewing you, the rest of the team. They had heard the interview, and I knew of you, as I told you last year, Jeff, through Doug from Season Pass, of course, is a friend of mine, listened to their show for a long time, and of course, Dusty Sage, related to Season Pass, does the events there every year. Because Season Pass is part of the Myspace network. So, friends of yours, and had heard you on on the various podcasts, and knew that you are very much someone that's, rooted in pop culture, of course, movies especially. And of course, that's where 91 Reasons focuses your podcast, which I listen to all the time now. But you're very much, what I have come to learn of you is you're rooted in comedy and horror. That's kind of your two branches. And so walking into Invitation to Terror and seeing the kind of 1980s again, you're a child of the 80s, you all love the 80s, so all that 1980s kind of motif and the comedy kind of in the beginning, kind of crazy characters, and then getting into the horrors later on the show. It was definitely unmistakably a Jeff Tucker creation. So I'd love to learn, because I've not seen anything like it before, Jeff. How did Invitation to Terror come to be? How did you come up with it?
Well, you can thank the shutdown, because the shutdown derailed a lot of plans at Scary Farm. Obviously, 2020 would have been a big year for Scary Farm with new attractions, and then 2021 would have been different. And Mesmer was scheduled for the previous year prior, right? Yeah. So when it was figured out that our governor was going to let us open for 2021 as Scary Farm and not Taste of Halloween, you have to look around, like, what can you do in the time frame? Mystery Lodge is a building that already existed. The infrastructure was already there. So Ken Parks, who at the time was head of entertainment, just in a text said, "What do you think of doing a show in Mystery Lodge about the 80s?" And I said, "Sure, why not? Let's do it." So the only edict was I had to use the Grimoire book, because if you've seen the stuff that's coming out for this year, there's a maze centered around the Grimoire. So the Grimoire was already in the pipeline. And they said, put it in a show and make it about the 80s. That's all the direction that was given. So I decided to make it about a crazy billionaire in the 80s, like Richard Branson, who goes around the world trying to find ways to gain power and be immortal. And he finds this book. He makes up a story that he found it in the desert when actually he bought it off some kids. And that ties directly into the maze that's debuting this year. There's a lot of nods to the maze that people didn't even know they were seeing. So those that did see Invitation will notice, oh, that kind of makes sense. Because what I've learned the last few weeks is that, yes, the mazes have stories, but they have really intricate stories that you may not even notice as you're zooming through them, but they are there, and they help sell whatever environment Daniel or the other designers are trying to create. So once the Grimoire was in place and what the plot would be, the building sort of lends itself to the flow of the show. You have the pre-show area. We'll make that the reception area. I'm not shy when I always say, if you're going to steal from the best. So I stole a lot of it from the Terminator 3D attraction at Universal. Just the idea of a very nice, attractive lady who's kind of a jerk to people, and she's trying to present all this information, and then it's going to go haywire against her. So we did that. We put a fake bar in the lobby with a little sign that said it opens after the presentation. I have that on my desk right now. And we were so shocked how many people, like, during the pre-show would walk up and try to buy a drink. And I would stand there in my Futuretronics t-shirt, and I would tell people it opens after the presentation. So you'll go in there and come back out. Oh, okay. And then, like, save me something. Hey, you got it. The queue area became all these posters for all these inventions that supposedly Futuretronics had come up with or was about to come up with. And I worked with designer John Aspirin. He came up with all that stuff, and all the inside jokes were him. He put in the flux capacitor and all that stuff. You came opening weekend, so you didn't see the other character that showed up later in the run.
No. Tell me about that.
He had filmed more footage. So in the queue, there was a monitor with the head of public relations of Futuretronics telling you all about the great stuff you were about to see inside. And that was pretty much lifted the flavor of it from Innoventions. Just the really smarmy, all this great stuff's inside. And he had and the other fun part was all the stuff he's talking about is obsolete. And if the kids don't know what it is, that makes it even funnier. He had a laser disc. He had a one of those big, giant, ugly cell phones. He had a wrist communicator and a beeper, which was a lot of fun. And then the show itself, it's a lot like some of the other shows I've done in there, and they all follow the same process. Something happens, you're in to see a presentation of some sort, and then it all goes awry. That's been since day one of these attractions. That's extraterrestrial. That's Honey, I Shrunk the Audience. And I'm not putting myself in that rare air, but that is the template. So you've got to, you can't just start with the ghosts on stage. You have to set it up and stretch it out to 8 or 9 minutes so that you give people something that they've waited in line for. So then the rest of it sort of wrote itself of this guy, and there's a host, and then there's an assistant on stage that gets killed, and all of the digital trickery that we did in there, which is fantastic because I don't know if it's changed, but at one point, Mystery Lodge was the largest Pepper's Ghost theater in the Western Hemisphere. So it's always sad when it sits unused, especially during Scary Farm, when you can do ghosts, for real ghosts.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So, that's interesting. Well, and again, I know we're not going to go into details on this, but I do look forward to the little hints you gave me there for the new maze this year and how it ties into Invitation to Terror. That's awesome because I did love the show, and I love the kind of the mythology around it and what happens in the show as you just described some of there. So I'm looking forward to how that new maze connects to that. So you mentioned Pepper's Ghost. I am a big fan of Pepper's Ghost, and for in case our listeners aren't familiar, you are familiar with Pepper's Ghost. If you've been on the Haunted Mansion ride in any of the Disney parks, you know the Pepper's Ghost. It's the ballroom scene. It's the ghost that you see. It's an optical illusion. It's one of the most clever optical illusions around. It's been around for many, many decades now. I think about 100 years or so. I think it was originally invented, and it's really, really effective. And again, like you said, the Mystery Lodge show is very much about Pepper's Ghost. It's a sit down theater, very large Pepper's Ghost effects that happen during that typical Mystery Lodge show. And I have seen the Mystery Lodge show just once in my life. Again, it's closed a lot, like you said, and I saw it, way back in like 2002 or so. And I remember the Pepper's Ghost effects that you had in Invitation to Terror last year, Jeff. They seemed a lot more crisp and intense and so forth. Now, for all I know, the projectors have been upgraded since 2002 for the regular Mystery Lodge show, or maybe not. But talk to me, was there anything that you had to do to upgrade the projectors, or had they already been upgraded for Invitation to Terror?
Well, I'll dance around it. How about that? Because I'm not allowed to speak directly about how Mystery Lodge works out of respect for Bob Rogers and BRC Company who built it. Here's how I'll dance around it. Mystery Lodge began as Spirit Lodge at the Vancouver Expo in 1986. So the technology to put Spirit Lodge up was from 1985.
Okay.
The technology for Mystery Lodge was unchanged when it opened. So it is still unchanged, and nobody uses that anymore at all. It's not used hardly anywhere except maybe in Tarantino world, right?
Right.
So when we go to do it, we're adding completely new stuff, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Yeah, no, and I understand you can't go to details. So that answers my question effectively. That was a good dance around. Thank you, Jeff.
There are lots of memes about stuff like this, but this phone has more technology than when Mystery Lodge opened in 1994.
I believe it.
No doubt.
I believe it. Yeah, and by the way, speaking of kind of technology and so forth, I remember, Jeff, you and I had been messaging, because I let you know we were coming and we wanted to kind of stop by and say hi to you. We knew you'd be busy, especially once we realized the scope of the show and that that was your baby last year. And we already had exited the show, and I wasn't thinking. I was just so blown away by the show, and especially what happens at the end, which was a huge surprise. And so we just kept on walking. I'm like, I wasn't thinking that. Of course, you would be there at the Mystery Lodge, and then I messaged you, and you're like, "Where are you?" I'm waiting at the exit. And we came back, which was hysterical. And then you gave us the backstage tour of the lodge there and of the the show, and obviously not showing us specifics, but just showing us, oh, there's where the computers are, that sort of thing. And we met the actors briefly. Thank you so much. That was so special to kind of get that little backstage little peek there. I really, really appreciate that. I'll never forget that.
Well, there is something to be said about if you go see a regular show, you applaud at the end, the actors take a bow, and everybody feels like they got their money's worth. For Terror and Mystery Lodge and the other two shows I did, Unearthed and Possessed, everybody's dead at the end, so nobody gets a bow, nobody gets a thank you. The actors are usually backstage using the restroom while the audience is filing out. It's very sterile. So when you can bring somebody in and say, hey guys, they really liked it, it makes the actors feel like, oh, okay, people are noticing what we're doing. We're feeling good about doing this.
Oh, okay, that's fantastic, because I didn't have that context.
Wins.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I remember when we did see them in the kind of dressing room, blue room, whatever you want to call it there. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember, telling them, you guys did a great job. Wow, what a show. So that's awesome. They would appreciate that, because they don't get that. Yeah, the applause.
Oh, yeah, no, there's no feedback.
Yeah.
Most of the audience, they assume everybody on stage is fake anyway, so they don't applaud at all.
Because
when Mystery Lodge ran, the usher would have to seed the applause, because most audiences think that it's like Mr. Lincoln.
Right. It's not. It's animatronics and Pepper's Ghost, and it makes sense.
And I should say really quick, if you saw the show 2001 or 2, it could have been me for all you know.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's right. You've been there a long time. Yeah, I know that. Speaking of Jeff of yesteryear. I was at actually, I think it was the last time I saw you in person, Jeff, was in February of this year, and we were at the farm there, and riding what is pretty much my favorite ride there at Knott's, which is Ghost Rider. And I might have been David, that was with me, of course, or maybe someone else, pointing out the safety video, which I had seen before. But I'm like, oh, that's Jeff, and because it's years, 20 plus years ago, I didn't recognize you. No beard and and all that stuff. So you're all over the farm.
My youngest is the other one in the video, and now every time they go to the park with their friends, everybody freaks out. Oh my God, it's you in the video!
That's funny. Yeah. That's really funny. Wow. So we talked all about Invitation to Terror here, and I was sad to learn that when the details were coming out for Knott's Scary Farm this year, and the source I usually use for this, which is absolutely fantastic, another plug, but they deserve it, is Mice Chat and Dusty and his team. They put out an article and they update it, and so forth, with what's coming, what's not coming, what's new, and so forth, and what's not returning. And what was mentioned in there is that Invitation to Terror is not returning this year, and it was its first year last year. So can you share, and I'm sure you're probably maybe limited on this one too, but what you can say at least about why this show is allowed to shine so brightly just that 1 year last year and not afterwards?
Yeah, no, it's easy. It's easy. There's a maze back there now.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Whenever there's a maze back behind Mystery Lodge, and it's been 13X, Murder Manor, Voodoo Witch Project, Blood Bayou, Forevermore, Infected, it covers the emergency exits.
I see.
So if there's an emergency in the theater, everybody runs out into a zombie infested subway station. Plus, if there's a maze there, they're using the queue. They're probably using the pre-show. And it's a space thing. It's just a space thing.
I see. Got it.
The maze is funneled through a lot more people an hour than a show does. So you got to go with the maze. And even I understand that.
Oh, sure. And nothing against your, Invitation to Terror, but mazes, those are the big attractors.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like it haunts. Yeah. So
you go see Invitation to Terror when the maze lines are too long.
Yeah, right.
I have no illusions.
So actually, along these lines, though, Jeff, was by whatever metrics you use, whether it be feedback or people returning or just the number of people that go to the show, was Invitation to Terror, was it a success?
Oh yeah. You measure success here at Knott's as nobody walked out, nobody left during the show. Right. We did more presented shows than any show that has ever been presented at Scary Farm. because we were doing 4 to 5 an hour, which is unheard of. It's just a complete get them in, get them out, get them in, get them out. And most shows end and there's a 45 to an hour break to give the performer a break. But since I had 3 casts, we could just keep going.
Wow, you had 3 casts. Wow.
Yeah. So you can mix and match all the characters. Each of the Shacklefords had their own audio track, so the voice that you heard in the house versus the voice on stage was the same. I can't say enough about the behind the scenes people, from Jared, who did all of the video digital work, and Scott and everybody who did all the audio and sound and lighting and everything. To have a show that can present itself that technically and then immediately reset for the next audience, unheard of.
That's really impressive. Wow, so efficient. How many people would you say overall worked on Invitation to Terror? You know, the 3 different casts, all the technical people behind the scenes.
At least 60 people, 70 people.
Wow.
There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and I just stand there and make sure everybody has what they need and is, you know, motivated to get to the finish line, because, you know, the event's going to open whether you're finished painting or editing. Not. So, yeah.
Yep. I mean, look at Disneyland's opening day. They had to open, and they weren't ready.
Nope.
They were not ready. People were sinking into the pavement and everything else.
Walt said, you can buy Coca-Cola or Pepsi, but you can't pee in the streets. So he chose restrooms over soda fountains.
Yeah, that's right. They weren't quite ready.
Or drinking
last thing, drinking fountains. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So last thing I want to ask you about Invitation to Terror, and then we're going to talk about something else that Daniel was involved with last year. And I wasn't going to originally ask this in case, you know, I was wrong about it coming back. I was hoping that I had heard wrong, and you were going to tell me as a surprise, Jeff, it's coming back. Invitation to Terror is coming back better than ever. But that's okay. I get why it's not coming back, and I'm looking forward to the new maze and so forth. So at the end of the show, so you've got the pre-shows you talked about, then you've got the show with live actors behind the glass. You've got the Pepper's Ghost, very impressive, all the ghosts moving around, and it's all this stage show where everything is on stage, and brilliantly at the end. I was not expecting this, and I go to haunts all over the place. You've got these creepy figures, live actors, running across the aisles from left to right as people were sitting down there, just completely blown away. One question I have about that, first of all, again, brilliance. I tip my hat to you, Jeff. But wasn't there a safety concern because it's a dark room and people getting up and people getting tripped and so.
Yeah, well, it depends on how seasoned the monster is, because eventually those were pulled. We had two or three incidents where somebody stepped where they shouldn't, and we had to pull them. And we changed. The ending was constantly being changed after about weekend 3, maybe. But that's a trick we used in Unearthed. It's a trick we use in Possessed. Possessed is the one that got the best reaction. And the differences between the 3 shows were that the first 2 used street monsters. During the run of the show, we had specific times for the show, 1 cast or 2 casts with people getting days off. But the monsters would show up, 2 minutes before the run through. The doors would open, they'd run through and go, and they would run to the streets and continue working. This one was a dedicated cast so that I could use them in the Futuretronics pre-show area, and then they would change into monster gear for the run through. And the problem there is they just weren't seasoned enough. It's my fault. I was asking too much of them. So it was decided eventually to just reconfigure the ending, but you got to see it in all its glory, and it had its perfect intended reaction of, I thought I was safe in here. They're all behind glass.
Interesting. Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean, obviously I only saw the show once, so I can't compare it from my own 2 eyes, my own experience. But from what I saw, I was blown away by it. Seemed like to work perfectly. They all ran through there, and the audience's reaction, and we had a pretty good crowd in our group. I don't know if it was a full house, but it was not far off. And wow, people were freaking out. I mean, that's what you want. It was so well received. but you bring up an interesting point here, Jeff, and this is true as we get when we start to talk to Daniel about his attraction from last year. Very much true in mazes, and I see this is, if you think about a typical like a roller coaster, even one that has theming, it pretty much it's the same experience more or less. Roller coasters can warm up during the day, and there's the night rides, and that we as coaster enthusiasts we cherish night rides for two reasons. One, the coaster warms up, so it's a little bit faster at the end of the day, but also, an outdoor coaster at night, your psychology kicks in and the coaster seems faster because you can't see as well. It's why Space Mountain runs 40 miles an hour and it's so effective because it's indoors, it's dark. Your mind thinks it's going 80, but it's going 40. So, but again, fundamentally is the same experience, more or less, very consistent. But haunts, because they're so driven by people and even effects that are put together, some of them last minute because it's changed every year. Haunts, they're living, breathing entities, and they change through a given year, through a given season. I see this at all sorts of theme park haunts with big budgets like Knott's Scary Farm and Universal. And I go the first night, say at Universal, because I go there throughout because it's my home haunt, and it changes through the season. And of course, the other aspects of is the timing, whether or not you get the scares, or if it happens 3 people behind you, and that sort of thing. But yeah, even a show like that, because you were pushing the limits, things would have to change. So it makes sense. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, well, as Daniel will confirm, nothing's ever finished. It can always be made better.
Right. So they're really living entities for sure. Well, speaking of Daniel, so another new hit, well, I'm going to assume it's a hit. I mean, it was a hit for me for sure. That debuted in 2021 at Scary Farm was the brilliant new haunted house, Mesmer, Sideshow of the Mind. Now, I am someone who, again, I've already established I'm a big haunt fan. I love horror. But I'm, as part of that, I'm a big fan of the, kind of history of horror and horror related attractions in the themed entertainment industry. The sideshow freak show era. And there's been movies about this. There's been, entire seasons of horror shows. Like I love American Horror Story. Season 4 Freak Show is about this kind of stuff. But I just find it fascinating because it's very edgy. It's, politically incorrect, which I appreciate in the world we live in today, that we can have politically incorrect things like that and look back at history and so forth. And it's just fascinating. And so that Mesmer house last year, I was so here for that house, and it did not disappoint. So Daniel, tell us about how that new, very different in many ways, house came to be at Scary Farm.
As Jeff mentioned, that has been in the works for 3 years. I too have a fascination with old time carnival freak shows. I'm a big fan of Todd Hayes' Freaks, as well as what you mentioned, American Horror Story freak show. So a lot of that contributed, but I also really loved that old book / movie, Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Oh yeah.
About that traveling carnival that just pops up in this old-timey town and kind of takes over, but it's not necessarily good or nice. There's a very dark layer to it, and that's why I wanted to create with Mesmer was this traveling sideshow. We liked at Not Scary Farm to kind of build to the area, so like we'd always have our clown mains usually in our clown zone, which is our boardwalk area. We'd have Ghost Town be like an old timey maze type of feel, like Old Westy, which is our origins. So for this, the challenge was how to make it be a carnival, yet be still push the levels. There's a type of maze we used to do, or we still do, obviously, Mesmer's one of them. Is like a nightmares maze where you're walking through like room to room, different nightmares that you're experiencing. So we had one back called Delirium. We had Elvira's nightmares too as well. So we have like a long lineage of these nightmare mazes. And Mesmer is a bit of that. So Mesmer's story is that he's a traveling hypnotist and he's here to hypnotize you as you are dying. So he found out the secret to life after death. And this is the intricate backstory that we alluded to earlier. So what was happening was he actually hypnotized people and then murdered them, but they were still conscious because they were hypnotized. So they became Mesmer zombies. So when you walk through each of the rooms, you're going through their nightmare / hell version of each of the characters that you see out in the front of the freak tent. So this is what you're experiencing. The first room, which is a bit of a showroom, is from last year, is you go in and he is in the midst of killing one of his cast members and opening up a portal into this afterlife. So you walk through via a big zoetrope, a life-size zoetrope, and you go into, again, various characters. Like the first one you go into is the tattoo man's room, and his backstory is he ran out of room on his skin, so Mesmer convinced him, well, skin has two sides, inside and outside, so they would cut the tattoo artist open and tattoo on the inside because he was dead. He doesn't die from that. So it's very gruesome, and the stories are very much peppered in throughout, just like that, just different stories and also distortions of reality, because we are in sort of this fantasy hellscape of these characters. So on the outside, we really wanted to present the package of this old-timey Dust Bowl era freak show, and then hypnotist, because that was also a huge show that would travel around the Midwest at the time. But the inside kind of turned into this like nightmare escape, but still had tinges of this carnival, this dark carnival that like we saw from Something Wicked This Way Comes.
It's very cool. Yeah, definitely very intricate. Like you said, there's a big backstory there. And, very much like you said, on the outside, it looks like a, carnival, old timey carnival, maybe a kind of a freak show sort of thing. But there was a lot more than meets the eye inside. So that's fascinating. And I'm looking forward to experiencing it again this year. That's one of the things that I do like about, some of the theme park cons, like the ones that Cedar Fair does and other chains, in that, the houses, they don't go away after the first year. So that you get to experience them again. And it kind of makes up for, say not being my home haunt. Because, when I go to Horror Nights, one of the unique things about Horror Nights that, their budget and their focus is different. Their houses, all of them change every year. So at least with my home haunt, I go a whole bunch of times. So I get to experience those same houses multiple times. But, for ones where I only travel for a weekend once a year, like Knott's, I only get to experience a given house usually once per year. So that's why I look forward to getting to go through them again and noticing more. Now, hearing the backstory and understanding it better, because I didn't have all that last year, I'll definitely appreciate it differently and probably more so. So that I look forward to that. Well, thank you. And something that you alluded to, Daniel. So something that's kind of become a fixture with certain houses, certain mazes there at Scary Farm, is that show element could be in the house. Mesmer has it. Paranormal Inc., which I believe was retired last year, had it, right? And I think others too. So what makes you decide to add that initial show element, which is very differentiating and something that I think really is awesome in general at the beginning of a given maze? What makes you decide to do that?
Well, we're all storytellers. So the best way of telling the story is through a show element, to have a captive audience and to provide a scare. One thing I want to go back to with Invitation to Terror is one of the hardest things to do is to have a fixed audience be scared. Jeff Tucker achieved that in droves, especially with the crossing of the monsters to the audience. But notoriously, if you sit down in the theater, it's almost like the golden ring to capture. It's hard to capture a captive audience and scare them. That's why a maze is so wonderful, because you walk through it and you experience it 360. You don't know where that scare is coming from. From a sit-down experience, you do. But one thing that we gain from that sit-down experience is story. And one thing that movies have more than us, like we deal with, we don't deal with intellectual properties like Universal does.
Right.
They get the benefit of having a movie tie-in. So most of the people who go in already know that character, that shape is going to jump out. They're familiar with that backstory. So what we came up with was various times. It changed through history. We had something called a key room, which we would do as a separate admission, where you come through the beginning of a maze, and actually it would tell a bit of the backstory before you started to go through the maze. So it was a whole separate room, and we were getting better and better at this, but we wanted everyone to experience. And there's Paranormal Inc. was probably one of our most, I'm not sure if you went through that one. But
I've been through it multiple times. So I love Paranormal. Yeah.
That one has such a wonderful entryway and wonderful showroom to tell the story and to establish where you are right from the get-go. So, but alas, it's also about operations, and we are a big theme park trying to pump through as many people as we can. So we had to limit that as much, or be clever about it. Usually Paranormal's showroom was huge. It just had a ton of people, and I don't know if you noticed it, but it's siphoned into two separate parts.
Yes.
Which was a brilliant move to actually keep operations flowing, but it still was one of the longest lines that we had. Mesmer also had a very long line because we did try to contain the show, but more often than not, we had to let people flow through and just kind of rotate the show throughout the whole evening. So it's just big long loop of show. So
I see.
the storytelling is the big benefit for that. That's why we want to put it in. We want to get those backstories out there as much as we can.
Sure, that makes sense, especially since you have such an intricate backstory. Even if the public doesn't directly get exposed to it through a show element, you guys are creating it, and it's the spirit of the attraction of the maze or the show. So I'm sure as storytellers, you love to be able to get that backstory out there in that bigger way whenever you can. So yeah.
And Mesmer actually has something quite unique. This is a kind of an Easter egg. Not many people know this, but Mesmer started as like a cutting edge technology. There was, we tested it out. We were going to give everyone IR infrared headphones, and we were going to have the hypnotist whisper in your ear, telling you stories every room you go through. Now we opted for a different sensation where we've hid the speakers in the walls carefully at ear level, so you can hear the hypnotist Mesmer kind of give the backstory in each room. If you go slow enough, you'll hear all the backstory in very quick snippets that kind of explain what's going on in the room. So next time you come, just go maybe a little slower and try to listen to what they're saying.
You have to look out for that. Very interesting. Wow. So, one thing I'm curious about, and I asked actually both of you, one of the things I love about Not Scary Farm is it is very edgy. Jeff, as you and I talked about last year, it's in the name, scary. This is not family friendly. This is not, you don't want, unless you want the psychologist bills, the therapy bills, don't bring kids, all that stuff. And, if you look at all the different things you feature, the gruesomeness, for example, of Mesmer, how downright frightening it can be when those live actors come through at the end of Invitation to Terror. Puppet Up, which is very, I don't offend. I love all sorts of humor, insult comics and dirty humor. I love it all. And Puppet Up, which I'm looking forward to seeing again this year at Scary Farm. Those guys, they get pretty dirty. So, Hanging, was very inappropriate humor, which was fantastic. That's your creation, of course, Jeff, that you had for years. So, you guys have very edgy, adult themes and visuals and humor and whatnot. How often does it happen when you guys are creating elements of Scary Farm in a given year that someone comes up with something and you're like, no, it's too much? Or does that not really come up much because of how edgy you are?
You want to take a stab at it, and I'll take a stab at it.
My job is to be that edge, is to be as edgy as possible. I've always, throughout my career, have always been told, if it's too edgy, we'll tell you. And sometimes that isn't known until maybe the first night when we get like a bunch of letters about and the people's opinions change. So the edge moves quite a bit. And
right.
Something that we may consider edgy at 1 year may be completely acceptable the next year. So it also is, as a creator, a designer, someone who's constantly coming up with new ideas, you don't want to handcuff yourself by saying,
right.
like, oh, I shouldn't do this. Again, someone will tell me if it's too much.
Yeah, no, that makes
Be
sense.
open about it. Tell the producers or the people in charge that this is what you're doing, and have them experience. You don't want to surprise them, but definitely, don't edit yourself is another thing.
I see. Interesting. So sometimes it's based on feedback and in the early days, and like you said, letters, and could get service complaints or that. Yeah, I see. And then you can change it, like we talked about earlier. It's a living being. So
what we got complaints about before, we don't get complaints about now. And sometimes it's just the zeitgeist of it just switches. So people automatically start, thinking in totally different terms because maybe something in the news happened that, is offensive. All of a sudden, you have to change it all at haunt, and hopefully that doesn't happen too much. But
yeah, of course. Yeah, I certainly saw this for myself, as many of us did, that are old enough at least. The first time I ever went to Not Scary Farm, I think it was 2000, and then probably know where I'm going with this. I went there in October of 2001. Less than a month after the horrific events of September 11th. And I remember that year, the chainsaw guys were gone. There was a lot was dialed back. It was still a great event. And edgy, but I forget how I learned about it. This is the early days of the internet, but it was established that things were dialed back because of how traumatized people were, myself included, from the horrific real world events of the worst terrorist attack in human history. So, and it gradually, you guys have brought things back. Now, one thing I'm curious about, I don't think it was related to dialing it back like that, but just while I have you guys here, two of my kind of favorite unique things from Not Scary Farm in those early days were the actors on Timber Mountain Log Ride and the actors inside Calico Mine Ride. And at least for the Mine Ride, I heard, and I know that you guys did a major refurbishment on that. I don't know, what was it, 10 or so years ago. And I heard maybe that's why you don't have the live actors anymore. But is it because of how well themed your rides are? Having those actors on those two rides can damage the theming and so forth. Is that the issue?
That's the issue.
That's it, really.
Okay.
To be honest, that was a huge part of it. Was that they basically redid this. They put a lot of capital money into it. So and we basically dialed it back and said, okay.
Yeah.
We've seen Scary Farm maze rooms where it was in 13X Murder Manor. A guy was in a room that had a piano, and there was a large dinosaur bone that was attached to the piano with wire, like it was supposed to be like a conservatory. One night he got the bone loose, and he used the bone to destroy the room. And I tell you what, it was scary, but it was not scary in the right ways. And he did about $3,000 worth of damage that night, to which he was billed for. But that's why you can't put actors in those attractions anymore, because a lot of time, effort, and money was put into them. And honestly, a lot of the spots where the monsters would be, there's an animatronic man there too. So what are you supposed to do,
Yeah, no, for sure. So that actor in that maze, he just kind of really got into it and just,
he was,
I'm gonna have fun.
Oh yeah, he was tearing it up. Oh yeah,
literally.
We want that energy in our actors, but
rein it in.
Yeah, we need to make sure they're not destroying the whole.
Yeah,
I mean, it's all about everyone going through. We don't meter in that way where we stop people and have like a minute between each pulse. we do it where there's a lot more people coming through our mazes.
Right, the
So we
conga line,
want
as
to
they
make
call it.
sure
Yeah.
that we don't like the conga line. It's not the conga line.
Yeah.
But we definitely have a pulse, but not as tight as other places.
Not as tight. Yeah, it's not Universal's conga line. True, it's not as intense as that, but it's steady, fairly
I
steady.
can tell you a funny story. You're talking about how do we censor. I worked on the hanging for years with some very talented writers and producers and directors. Ken Parks worked on it, and Rob Perez and Frank Maciel, like really talented people. And there were years where we would put in jokes that were intentionally meant to get cut. That way they would leave the other jokes alone. That's a trick we learned from like South Park and other things where you put in what is obviously really offensive so that everybody gets upset about it and gets cut and the other ones get left alone.
So Jeff, fascinating. So Jeff, what you're saying is those jokes would be in the early days of the show in a given year, and then people would complain, and then they would get cut out.
No, before it even hit the stage.
Oh, they get cutting room floor then.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there any cases of this where you guys came up with some of those, and sometimes they've remained in there to your surprise?
Oh yeah. There was a big period in the middle there where Ken would write all of the really well-crafted jokes, and I would write the really just baseline filthy jokes, and together they merged very well. And I remember a joke, I don't think I can even say it on your show, where opening weekend, we had the battle between Ronald McDonald, Wendy, the Colonel, Jack in the Box, and it was all these fast food references. And some of the jokes were really, really dirty. And I remember standing next to the then head of entertainment who just turned to me and he said, "That's cut." And I said, "But it's funny." He said, "It's cut. It's cut."
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So there are, obviously there are limits. It's a public theme park, and they don't want to go too crazy, but still,
they've let us get away with a lot of stuff that Daniel has put in mazes, that I've put in shows, that in today's world would have a picket line out front.
Yeah, that's Jeff, you and I are very like-minded in our perspectives on the world and so forth, and which I value our friendship for that, and it's sad that it is that way, but it is, we have to live in reality, and that's
I would
part
refer
of it.
everyone to watch Martin Scorsese's The Age of Innocence, where Daniel Day-Lewis is engaged to be married and falls in love with another woman, and he can't do anything about it because society's rules are so rigid. There are things they can do, they can't say, they can't talk to, they can't walk.
Yeah.
And you watch it, and I remember seeing it opening night in the theater, horrified by all these societal rules. You can do this, you can't do that. Let's not forget the Victorians are the ones who came up with white meat and dark meat because they weren't comfortable saying they wanted a piece of the breast. And we are racing towards the second coming of that kind of society. It's terrifying.
Sad. Yeah, it's very scary, sadly. So, well, Daniel, I wanted to ask you one more kind of question about Mesmer. So, as I alluded to earlier, we already kind of established that Mesmer is coming back for its second year this season here at the farm. So, is there anything you can share about any tweaks or upgrades, things that I might notice different about Mesmer this year?
Sure. Definitely the what we talked about most, that opening room that was performance based is definitely dialed back because of operations, because we need to get more people through. So we want to immerse the story. So what we did was almost a sequel to that showroom. So the showroom before was Mesmer hypnotizing one of the actors and opening this portal. Now we've come to the point where he's already opened up the portal. So when you go right into that showroom, you'll see the portals opened, and you'll see the zoetrope that was spinning around is completely destroyed. And there's carnage everywhere. It's just the tent, inside the tent is all burnt up. And so it's kind of like a fun addition, or kind of the sequel to what we saw the first year. So
I see.
that way it's kind of completely different. We've added some things to the rest of the maze. I'm a big proponent though of, like once I've conceived it, I try to keep it the same as much as possible. But we definitely extended. One thing we couldn't do in COVID was more of a claustrophobic hall after the snake dancer. There's a snake charmer. And saw this snake demon that was dancing, but we've elaborated on that more, and it's far more claustrophobic this year than it is. And we've eaten that. There's an interesting, which I don't think you see anywhere else. There's a swinging room that kind of was a metronome that you walk through. That we tightened that up so the illusion's even more, I guess, suffocating. Is the best.
So was the metronome room? Was that was there last year?
That was there last year, but we've tightened it up, made it a little bit more. The illusion is pushed more. So
because I do remember one of the things that stuck out for me last year, because I had not been to Scary Farm in about 4 years, because I had moved to Florida and not been back since 2017. Is there were, I think, one maybe two mazes where the floor was, because when someone goes to a haunt, a Universal, a Six Flags, a Cedar Fair, or even an independent haunt, you expect the flooring to stay the same, to be stable. So I remember at Scary Farm last year, and that's probably what I'm thinking of. There was in one or two areas where things moved around, and I was like, wow, that was one of my wow moments from last year. So
yeah, that's definitely happening a little bit in Mesmer. We have like a vibrating floor. And at the end of Pumpkin Eater, we have this vibrating floor that just affects you when you go through.
Nice.
There is also in the depths, we have a rocking boat.
Yes, that's the other one. I love the depths is one of my favorites. Yeah, that's what I was probably thinking of too. Yeah. No, I mean, wow. I mean, here we are. We're as we record, we're just under a month away from Not Scary Farm opening, and basically literally a month from when I'm planning to be there with David and the rest of the team. And talking to you guys, I'm getting so excited to go back to the farm this year. So last couple questions here for you guys. So we always ask, and Jeff, you answered this question last year. If you have kind of something new to share, maybe something kind of haunt focused, or there's something new to share, you're welcome to answer this question again. But Daniel, this is of course a new question for you. The Coaster Challenge, we're all about theme park therapy, which includes theme park haunts. And what better way to train yourself to be okay with anxiety and to scare the bejesus out of you, and for it to all be okay in the end, a controlled environment like a haunt. So in terms of facing fear and living one's best life, as they say, any advice you'd like to share and give to our audience, Daniel?
No, just come and enjoy it. That's basically it. It's all about, I understand exactly what you're coming from, the confrontation of the fear. It's something that is a release. It's something that is cathartic. You go in and just, there's something about being scared, going to a horror film, having something pop out at you. I work 2 levels, I like to say. One is that boo scare moment where the actors jump out. There's also the storytelling element where that creepy story stays with you a little longer. And, you constantly are thinking about what was that story about? How can I find out more about it? So I think those experiences really come to me from my mom, and from the fact that she was she lived a very happy life. People often think you must be a completely dark person, creating all these really dark mazes. But I'm not. I'm very happy. And I live a very happy life. And why? I think I get a lot of this out from my work, from creating these these mazes and shows that are just creepy and spooky. So
that makes a lot of sense. It's sort of for you as a creator, for both of you, it's sort of it can be a form of stress relief and cathartic. I totally can see and imagine how that would be. And you know, by the way, and you mentioned your mom again. You mentioned your mom at the beginning. I very much can relate to that. That's kind of almost nostalgic for me. As my mom's no longer alive, she passed away about 10 years ago, but she is the reason why I'm as adventurous as I am and why I love theme parks. And she was the one that took me to the parks when I was a kid. And she was to the last day that she was alive. She was a big kid. You know, she was a kid at heart, and that's where I get it from, and I cherish that. So love that you have that too with the horror side with your mom. That's really cool, Daniel. And Jeff, you know, and again, no is perfectly acceptable. You've answered this question before. But any new? I mean, you always have your pearls of wisdom. Any new pearls of wisdom to share at the end here?
I thought Daniel said it pretty well. I don't think I could add to that. He's
okay.
You know, people always have an assumption about what kind of people we are based on the products that we make, and that's not always the case. You know, Steve Jobs stuff was amazing, but he was probably a big a-hole. So it doesn't always line up. And if you want to meet the nicest group of people you've ever hung out with, go to a Scary Farm event, go to a Halloween convention. All those people dressed up like every day is Halloween are the nicest people you will ever hang out with.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you for pointing out that little pearl of wisdom, Daniel. That's really, really actually kind of deep in a way. So happy people are the ones that create the haunts. That's a really good point. All right, well, very good. Well, last thing I'm going to ask you guys, as we always do, is, you know, we've talked all about Scary Farm, but just for maybe probably just the few listeners that don't know how to find out, you know, if you want to share any social media. I know, like, for example, Scary Farm has its own social media accounts. What website for people to go to buy tickets? If there's any, I know there's supposed to be a couple of new things this year, like there's a behind the scenes tour. Anything you want to share, kind of final promotion stuff?
Yeah, go to knots.com. It'll direct you to buy tickets to the event. Get there early. They do sell out almost every single night. If you can go on an off night, you'll have more fun because it won't be as crowded. It'll still be crowded, but it'll be a nice crowd of people you want to hang out with. Not Scary Farm and Knott's Berry Farm are on every major platform, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. They have a presence, so you can interact and ask questions. You mentioned the behind the scenes tour. That's what I'm working on this year. That's my baby this year. Beyond the Fog is an all new idea for Scary Farm. It is not scary. It is during the day. You can buy a ticket at knots.com for it. It is a 3-hour tour of Knott's Berry Farm history, Knott's Scary Farm history mostly, and then a lights on tour of 3 of our mazes where you can see how it's all done, see what it looks like in the daylight, take some pictures that nobody else has because you have to be on the tour to get the shots, and learn more about Scary Farm than you ever thought possible. I've been putting the Bible for it together right now, and we've got some amazing tour guides, and it's going to be a really amazing, different experience for those who want to go even deeper into the stories of the mazes, how they're created, what the storyline of the maze is, and all the Easter eggs that are hidden that you don't see when you're screaming through in the dark. Beyond the Fog, go check it out.
Interesting. Now, Jeff, wow, it's a lot more than I thought it was from looking at the website. And I just looked at it cursorily, to be fair, when I looked on the website. So I'm now thinking about it. I'm gonna have to talk to David about it and the rest of the team. But if we were to do this, because we're planning on doing the buffet at Mrs. Knott's,
we'll have you done before the buffet.
Okay, so it times out. Perfect. You know what I was getting at.
We have to, because we're the day show of the behind the scenes stuff, but it still has to operate at night. So it's the bread and butter. We're leaving, you're coming in.
Right.
Edict.
Brilliant. That's awesome. And yeah, especially knowing that you're behind this. And I love Scary Farm so much, learning about history. It's not just going to be, hey, here's a maze that we're going to walk through. It is literally oodles of information of every conceivable aspect of what the maze is. I've walked through each of the mazes personally with the designers. I've gotten all the stories, all of the hidden things that the painters and the prop people and everybody else put into them. Again, it's amazing what you can see when the lights are on, and it's going to be really cool. Interesting. Now, you mentioned 3 hours. Is it going to be like each tour goes through a few mazes and it can be, each tour will be different, or is it all the mazes, or how's that work?
You get 3 mazes out of whatever's available, because we can only use the ones that aren't being repaired from the night before, if that makes sense.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So it's a rotating. Every day that we do an operation will be a different combination. So we can't guarantee which ones you're going to get, because we don't know which ones we're going to get.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. All right. Yeah. I'm going to have to think about that. I remember the price was actually pretty reasonable. I think is it $80, I think, for that? Or 90?
It's right around there.
It's somewhere in that area. We're still, I keep to explain to people, we're still early in the run. We're still, nothing's happened yet.
Right.
But you get a lanyard and a pin and the company of an amazing performer for 3 hours. And if you want to hang out, there'll be a lot of days where I'm just sort of bopping around the tour and answering questions. And because even as well prepared as the tour guides will be, there will be somebody with questions they cannot answer. So I'll try to be around for those. The minutiae.
Nice. Okay. Right. Okay. Wow. All right. That's what I'm thinking about this. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, guys, thanks so much for taking the time to kind of go behind the scenes a little bit of 2 of the attractions from last year from Scary Farm. And you've gotten me so excited for this year. And I'm sure our listeners listening are going to be excited as well. And just, thank you so much for everything today.
You're welcome.
This has been great. Great again.
Awesome.
We'll see you in the fog.
Always. Yes. In the fog.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to see more of us, we upload every Friday. And check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all at Coaster Challenge. Links are in the description below. Thanks for joining us here today.